Welcome, United Women in Faith. Most of you probably know that the name has been changed. Yeah. We have been diligently working on the technical problems, and I wanted to say welcome to United Women in Faith. That's the new name they've chosen. Some of you might be aware of that. I wanted to read a little something about the history of United Women in Faith. The previous, now I can't think of the old name, United Methodist Women has changed its name more than 25 times throughout its 153-year history. It started out as the Methodist Women's Foreign Missionary Society in 1869. It had numerous other names, but in 1972, the United Methodist Women became the Women's Mission Organization as part of the United Methodist Church's Board of Global Ministries. And it wasn't until 2012 that the UMC General Conference voted to make United Methodist Women autonomous. Since then, the interfaith work has soared. United Methodist Women always welcomed women of other faith. But now the new name states that, United Women in Faith. And part of the reason for that is it reflects the existing change within the group and also allows for those women's circles that are part of churches leaving the UMC to continue under the same umbrella organization. So with this upcoming possible divide in the Methodist Church, the United Methodist Women, now United Women in Faith, will remain the same, always inclusive, always working on their missions. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to think of what I want to say. Looking back, we see the lines for our organization: faith in God, love for each other, and commitment to putting our faith into action, supporting women, children, and youth. These commitments have been expressed in different ways, different times, different names, but always calling women to world-changing action. This combination of a new look, more accessible resources for members, and new ways to participate positions us for impact in our own journeys and in how we engage the world that God so loves. And on the website, there was this quote: "Things change, people change, but God remains." And that continues to be the purpose behind everything that we do in this organization. Let's see. So now we're going to have a devotion, which Suzanne Lancer usually does, but she unexpectedly could not make it today. So Pat's going to come up and read Suzanne's devotion. No, well, I don't know.
I don't know that I need to stand this tall, but that's all right. This is called Faith Through the Fog. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." And then Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." This is 1 Samuel 3, 10 and 11. And this reading that I'm going to give is by Tim Tate. Traveling through a thick fog, I was listening to a devotional program based on the calling of Samuel. The speaker gave an invitation simply to pray Samuel's prayer. "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And then we were to be silent and listen. The road on which I was traveling was crooked, and the thick fog created even more danger. I passed fields and thickets of trees from which deer could easily veer into my path. I cautiously navigated the road ahead and prayed, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." God spoke by revealing how the moment was a great analogy for how to live by faith. I thought about how often it feels as if we were living in a fog, enveloped in the cares of our world while doing our best to follow the path before us. Then God reminded me that though the road ahead can be dark and winding, the light of Christ is always with us, leading us to where we need to be. I realized in the moment that if I trust the guiding light of God's care, I will ultimately be okay. I did make it safely to my destination, with the words of Samuel still echoing in my mind. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Will you pray with me? O God, be forever the light before us and the voice that calls us. Help us to listen and respond. In Jesus' name, amen.
And Karen Bridgeford is going to introduce our speaker.
Sorry, I'm not sure. Carolyn Wick is at home listening, and she apparently can't hear, so I'm texting her about that. So I am doing something in regard to this, not just randomly texting. Our speaker is Amy Good, who has a Master of Social Work degree and has served as the Alternatives for Girls CEO since 1998. She has over 34 years of experience managing and directing human services programs serving Detroit children and families. Under her leadership, AFG has grown from a volunteer-led project to a full-service agency serving homeless and high-risk girls and young women, along with their families, through street outreach, emergency shelter, transition to independent living, and prevention services. In 2017, Crane's Detroit Business recognized AFG as that year's best managed nonprofit, acknowledging AFG's growth and success. Now that's what she gave me. She neglected to say that she can ride a unicycle, because that is where I first met her, through the Redford Township Unicycle Club. So we welcome Amy, and thank you for coming today.
I don't usually get to say this, but I feel extra tall here. Good morning. Thank you, Karen. Thanks, everybody, for inviting me. It's a really wonderful opportunity to share our mission and our work and our story. So I'm going to say just a few words of introduction, and then we're going to do this video. And I really thank the two brave women who would not be daunted by the technology challenges this morning. Just such patience and determination. Okay, so I am really privileged to be the leader at Alternatives for Girls, we call AFG. As Karen said, we serve homeless and high-risk girls and young women. And this is our 35th anniversary year. I can hardly believe that. I was 12 years old when we started, of course. But we started just in response to an alarming increase in the needs of girls and young women in Southwest Detroit. We serve the whole city of Detroit and to some extent beyond. But we started specifically in response to just in like 1985, 86, there was just a series of neighborhood conversations. I was living in Southwest Detroit, and there was a series of neighborhood conversations as we were just noticing what was going on with girls. And there were services. There was a community center that served almost entirely boys. It wasn't even their intention or their plan, but that's just how it kind of evolved. And we were seeing there was a really dramatic increase in gang activity at that time. And what was new and different was that girls were participating in gangs, really freaking out families. We were seeing girls that were sleeping in the park. We were seeing young girls just not going to school, staying home to take care of younger siblings. I mean, like fourth graders. We were seeing girls being pressed into sex work by their families for income. We were seeing really a real increase in just girls and young women engaged in sex work on the streets. And just, you know, a series of informal conversations, having dinner at each other's houses, snowballed into having more organized meetings, in particular at St. Peter's Episcopal Church, right across the corner from Tiger Stadium, if people can picture Tiger Stadium. And of course, I don't mean Comerica Park, I mean Tiger Stadium on Michigan and Trumbull. So right across that corner is St. Peter's Episcopal Church, and that's where we started meeting, as well as Most Holy Trinity Church, a few blocks closer to downtown. And our conversations just grew, and the neighborhood engagement grew, and we had a neighborhood forum in June of 1987 and decided, you know, just to talk about what needs to be done. I was working with child abuse and neglect at the time. That was my job. But I was part of the neighborhood and part of the conversation. And we just decided something needed to be done about what was going on with girls and young women. And we took on the name Alternatives for Girls as our project. We thought, you know, our goal was to find already existing organizations to step up to the plate and address some of these unmet needs that were going on. It was really unacceptable to us to have homeless girls with no place to go. And what we found was that they were, this is an oversimplification, but they were too old for the foster care system and too young for the adult shelter system. And that was just unacceptable, and we needed to do something. So we took on the name Alternatives for Girls. We wanted to find positive alternatives for girls in our neighborhood. And set about, we thought it might take us about a year. We had no intention of becoming an organization or an agency. But there was lots and lots of interest, lots of engagement by all kinds of people, but nobody willing to step up to the plate and address these needs. And we finally said, we got to do it. And I'm going to interrupt myself for a second and say that I really love that the devotion was about faith, because that's, I believe that Alternatives to Girls is a story of a series of miracles. So I'll tell you about one, which is we decided we had to do this ourselves. There was a request for proposals put out by HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, that fall for shelter for special populations, one of which was youth. So the pastor of the church and I submitted this proposal. His wife flew to DC the day it was due, correcting, you know, collating, making corrections on the plane. It was kind of nuts. Submitted the proposal in November of 1987. We got turned down in December. We decided we got to do this. There's no turning back. We had a goal of opening by April. And we were looking for money. One super cold day in January, a girl came to the door. She was 16. She had I spent a few hours with her. I had quit my job by this time and I had saved up money so I could work for free for a while. No place to go, no safe place. And we just looked at each other and just said, I guess we're going to open today without money, kind of a different business plan. And we did. And I just spent the weekend calling friends that have been involved in the project and the conversation over the year and a half and said, come on down, take a shift, bring the family. If you can't come, send money. And we opened. We were full by the end of that week with 5 girls in the shelter. We staffed it around the clock with volunteers, and the pastor and I taking turns spending the night and filling in shifts, and we were off and running until, and every day we'd open up the mail and go buy groceries. It was really crazy until I got a call the second week of April, and I will never forget that, from HUD. Remember HUD earlier in the story? The program that had been funded, one of the programs that had been funded was shutting down, a program in Houston, turning back their grant. And we had no idea we were the second highest scoring grant that had not been funded. So we were getting $376,000 as of July. So we were able to hire people, pay people to stay up all night. We bought a street outreach van. We hired a street outreach director who'd been a police officer. She had worked in what they called Vice. We had our first street outreach shift on Christmas Eve that year, and we were off and running. So I'm going to just stop for a second. We're going to play this video, and because the sound isn't working, I'm going to narrate as necessary. But I wanted to say one other thing about how I'm so happy to be here. I've lived in Detroit my whole adult life, but I grew up in Farmington Hills, and I went to school at Our Lady of Sorrows just over the hill, and I've always loved downtown Farmington. But I've never been in this church before, so I really especially appreciate the invitation. It feels like home. So, okay, and let me ask a question. You know, I was planning on 30 minutes, but since we started a little late, when should I finish? I'll just do whatever we need me to do. Okay. All right, so the video's like 3.5 minutes long, and we'll see. I don't think you'll be able to hear it, but I can see it, and so I'll talk as needed. Yeah, it's not. But I'm not hearing any sound at all.
I know, I turned it off so you could talk.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. This is Sharon. She's one of the women that we served on the street. And she's in our sewing project. It's a social enterprise. This video was made by the University of Michigan because I'm an alum, and it was one of a series that they made, so that's why the Michigan. And there's me wearing the exact same sweater. Anyway, this is our street outreach team. These are some of the young girls that we're serving. Some of the girls are doing their homework in our computer room. There's me talking again about how we just share power with people. Makia is talking about how she had her first job interview a few days earlier. She's in her beautiful room now she's in the community room. Anyway, she was starting her first job the next day. These are our street outreach staff who are loading up the van and getting ready to go out on shift. And that's our van. We're on West Grand Boulevard, just north of Michigan Avenue in Southwest Detroit. So they're loading up things that we take and we give to girls and women of any age that we serve on the street, most of whom are victims of sex trafficking. So that's our sewing project we call Sew Great Detroit. And as I said, we work with girls and women of any age. This young woman in the white, Darzell, is talking about how her son was murdered, and she came to AFG to participate in a grief group that we had, and how she's found so much solace in our sewing skills program. So there's our girls talking about the after-school program. That's Diane, who is a junior at Cass. This was made 2 years ago. She's a junior at Cass right now. And the girls do all kinds of after-school stuff. She's saying, the food is pretty good. And that girl that just said, I feel pretty safe here, which is my favorite line. So we do all kinds of things with girls after school. This is I'm in the community room in our shelter. This is a little pitch for U of M that they had to fit in there. So I'm in the community room in the shelter, and there's me again, walking to the front door. It's a beautiful building, as it should be. That's our building. Sometimes people are very surprised at how beautiful it is. You don't think of a building that beautiful when you think of a homeless shelter. And she's saying, thanks to AFG for always being there. So, anyway, at least you got to see some of the adorable and lovely girls and young women. So I'm going to jump forward. I won't talk month, thank you very much for making that video work. I'm not going to talk month by month about the last 35 years, but I'm going to jump ahead and talk about what we're doing now, and then I'm going to stop and see if there are questions. So we've grown a lot. We've grown a lot in response to the need, and people often ask about our funding. So we're very unique in that we have a residential shelter, and we take in girls and young women between the ages of 15 and 21. They can be pregnant or parenting or both or neither. As I said, and this is an oversimplification, again, they're too old for the foster care system and too young for the adult shelter system. In particular, the minors who are under 18, often as minors, as they're approaching 18, the foster care system should take them in, but sometimes doesn't. And they're not allowed to go into an adult shelter. So some of them have really no other alternatives. The foster care system is overwhelmed, their caseloads are full, they prioritize younger children. And girls who are 16, 17 just sometimes can't get placed. And so they have, and even the young adult women, 18, 19, 20, they could go into adult shelters, but often they are just afraid to. They've heard scary things, and they choose instead to stay in abandoned cars, abandoned buildings, or with friends that they just met who are, not interested in their welfare. So anyway, just to give you an outline of the areas of our work right now, and then I'll tell you a little bit more specifics. So there's our shelter and transition to independent living program. So I told you who we serve, and they are homeless on their own without a parent or guardian for lots of reasons. More often than not, it's a matter of physical abuse, sexual abuse, drug use that they are escaping, or that they've been thrown out of their homes. Sometimes there are just no adults to care for them. Sometimes the adults have disappeared from their lives. Sometimes a family becomes homeless and they scatter, and there's, to different relatives and friends, places or homeless shelters, but there's no room for this 17-year-old girl anywhere. So all kinds of circumstances. Sometimes they have been on the street. They've left home years before they find us, and they've been on the street, surviving, victims of trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking. So when they come to us, they really need to take some time to get safe, get settled, get well. Many times they have not seen a doctor in their memory. They have chronic infections. They're undernourished or malnourished. And they get calm, they get well, they get safe, and then we start to work. And we help them get their education back on track. We help them get employed so that at whatever point they leave, they can support themselves in a safe and legal way. We have, as part of our shelter and housing, just as of 2 years ago, we have a grant with which we can subsidize apartments for them. And it depends on their income, and it's, it is kind of, what's the word I'm looking, we start out paying a higher percentage, and then as they save up more money, and they have to be employed and have some savings before they can enter into this agreement, but they pay an increasing share of their rent until they're paying all of it, but we're there to support them throughout. We also have big plans this year. We're partnering with a nonprofit developer, and we are breaking ground this summer for a 45-unit apartment building in Northwest Detroit that is going to provide somewhat longer-term housing for those who no longer need 24-hour super structured support, but they will benefit from something like, they don't need 24/7, but they can use being part of a community and something like 40 hours a week of support. And we're going to have a child care center in that building, so we're very excited about that. So housing is program number 1. Outreach is program number 2. We drive around the streets all hours of the day and night and work with girls and women who are in sex work, most of them victims of sex trafficking. We don't shove things down their throat. We are out there to recognize their humanity. We give them things, clothing, sandwiches, drink, coffee, cold water, depending on the season, coats. We let them know about our services on site and invite them to participate, but we also let them know that, we care about them regardless of what choices they make or when, and we'll be out there again 2 days later. Sometimes it takes a long time to build up a relationship with someone before she's interested and feeling ready to come on site and participate in some of our support groups. And we have a number of different types of support groups that we run. And there's a kind of a ladder of leadership, and the girls and women can come in and start participating in our groups and take on leadership roles and eventually get to the point where we hire them and they're part of our staff. And they're really important in supporting one another. At whatever stage they are in deciding to leave that life, halfway there, they've left sex work behind, but they're still struggling with substance abuse or other kinds of abuse. One of the things that's happened in recent years, even before COVID, and I can talk about this more, I can talk about the trafficking dynamic a little bit more, but just want to say this, that in the past few years, something that's happened with sex trafficking is that it's gone more of the transactions are happening on the internet instead of on the street corner. So at, first glance, that might seem like it's safer. It's not. Because when people are on the street corners, they have more access to the public and to escaping if they want to escape. But with more of those transactions happening on the internet, more and more girls and women are actually being held captive in buildings. It sounds like something, out of TV, but it's very real. And it's very difficult to escape, physically difficult. We partner with all the levels of police agencies, Detroit Police, Wayne County, State Police, FBI. We partner with all of them, and we participate when they do sting operations. We're not busting down the door, but we're like in a nearby undisclosed location, and they bring the girls and women to us that they have liberated, and then we work with them and help connect them to our services or other services. So sex trafficking is really in full swing, and it did kind of go down during the early days of COVID, but not for long, and it came back in full swing very quickly. So anyway, that's our street outreach. Other aspects of our street outreach work are we recruit high school age girls who are involved in some high-risk activity. Doesn't have to be sex work. Could be dropping out of school, using drugs, drinking, being in a violent relationship, even running away from home. We recruit them. We educate them in this very rigorous curriculum about making safer choices, and then we hire them. They join our staff. We have 18 what we call peer educators right now, and they reach out and educate their peers about a range of risks, how to avoid and minimize those risks, how to understand them. Everything from protecting yourself from becoming a victim of trafficking to how to avoid gangs, how to leave gangs, how to recognize relationships that are abusive or on their way to becoming abusive, drugs, drinking, the whole thing. And they are phenomenal. And they do street outreach. They don't do the midnight stuff, but they do street outreach, in the afternoons after school, as part of teams with our staff nearby. We're very structured and organized and safe. But they are a really important part of our team. We also, as you saw, have our social enterprise program that teaches sewing skills, basic sewing skills. We've had 2 young women graduate from our sewing skills project and get into an industrial sewing skills training program, getting scholarships to complete that 8-week training. And 2 of them have just graduated from that 8-week training course and are now employed with good wages as industrial sewers. And we have another young woman who was actually on the video who's starting this past week. She started in the industrial sewing program. Anyway, and then finally there's our prevention program. We work with girls from kindergarten through high school, help them stay in school. These are girls who are living with their families in Southwest Detroit. We help them stay in school, graduate from high school. We help their families help them. We do a range of things, just whatever it takes. We do after-school program. We do tutoring. We have a summer program. We have what we call an asset-building program. Starting in 4th grade, we help them develop a college-bound identity. And one of the ways that we do that is we open up a college savings account for them. We make an initial deposit. We match their deposits as they save money. We only have $500 per girl, but someday we intend to make that $2,000 per girl. And they save babysitting money and birthday money, and they deposit it. And these are girls with their families have very low income. When we started this program a couple of years ago, with 45 girls in middle school, not a single family of those 45 girls had a relationship with a bank. Now they all do. Because the girls had to start a savings account in order to have this 529, if some of you know what that is, college, state, it's a state program for college savings with special tax benefits. So they have to have a savings account at a bank in order to transfer money from that savings account to the 529 college savings account. All their families now have relationships with banks. We do college visits. We do mentoring. We do college visits specifically for the parents so that they can develop some expertise about what college is like, what a campus is like. It's kind of hard for a place or an experience that your child is on their way to be a completely foreign land to you. So we want the parents, to develop some level of comfort and understanding about the college experience and college campus. We just help them be successful in school, whatever it takes. They're very, very important supports to one another. Last spring, in the midst of COVID, which I could talk about for longer than we have, because it's time for me to stop. It was very, very difficult for the girls that we serve to stay in school. To continue to progress in school. Internet connectivity, we can all relate to that today. But they had internet connectivity programs, when the school was remote. We'd provide the families with internet, with equipment and software and connectivity, but there might be 4 children who all need to share it, not enough equipment to go around, and it's just really hard for especially young children to stay engaged on a computer screen. But our staff were brave, never missed a beat in the shelter with prevention girls. Last spring we had 22 girls in all 3 of our programs graduate from high school, all of them except for 1 college bound. We were really proud of that. So that's just kind of an overview of who we are and what we do. I started talking about funding and I realized I interrupted myself. We're very unique in that we have a shelter for minors, which means that we have to have a license to house minors who are unaccompanied by a parent or guardian. This license has very, very rigorous requirements about staffing, credentials, how wide the hallways are, lots and lots of safety regulations, as they should have. Lots and lots of requirements of our credentials for everybody, which is, appropriate. And yet we don't, because we're not a foster care placement, we don't get that per diem, that $250 to $500 per day per child that a foster group home gets. So we are funded by just dozens and dozens of grants from all different sources, private, family foundations, government, and we have lots and lots and lots of individuals who support us. So we're very unique in that way, and that's a blessing and a curse, because, the state per diem can rise and fall, and sometimes programs go out of business as a result of the state per diem level falling, or the state deciding to cut back in that area, whereas we're funded by so many different funding sources. On the one hand, it takes a lot of time to write grants, and we just had our big annual fundraiser on Wednesday. On the other hand, collectively, our funding is more stable. Hence, our designation as the best managed nonprofit from Cranes a few years ago. So I will stop and see if people have questions or comments. In our,
In regard to the kids that are in or is it also contained in that building by the people that you support?
okay, sure. I think the question was, how is the school system connected with us and vice versa? Is that it? Is it? Right. So, we're not a school, and we don't have any school operating on our site. The young girls in our prevention program, they're living with their families and going to school. We do after school and summer programming with them. The girls that live in our shelter, they're between 15 and 21. Most of them are not in school when they arrive, and of course, we get them into school. So we either drive them or they take the bus to school. Those who are older, they may need to get their GED. Sometimes they've graduated from high school, usually not. So we help them get their GED or go to night classes, alongside with working, so they will be able to support themselves. We want, when they leave, for them to be able to support themselves. So work is important alongside school. But and some of them are going to college. Some of them are taking college classes. I mean, once they get settled and get their plan, and we get them going on their plan. They don't usually come to us as college students. Does that answer your question? Other questions? Oh, so the question is our residential facility something we built ourselves? Yes. That was another miracle. Yes, so I didn't really explain. We started at St. Peter's Episcopal Church. 19 years ago, we moved into our current building, which we built from the ground up. We were at Michigan and Trumbull. Now we're about a mile and a half straight west on Michigan Avenue, right where on West Grand Boulevard. People think of West Grand Boulevard and usually think of the Mexican restaurant area or the New Center area, and we're neither. We're right in between, where West Grand Boulevard travels. And yeah, we raised $5 million. Sometimes when I say it, I feel like, who said that? $5 million. But we did. We raised $5 million. We got a lot of help from General Motors, from the Big Three. People remember talking about the Big Three. We got a significant help from Oprah Winfrey. And we built our beautiful building and moved into it 19 years ago. And we were able to expand. We started out with, we were full by the end of that week with 5 beds. When we got that grant in July of 1988, we opened to 12 beds. When we moved into our building 19 years ago, we now have 24 beds for young women and up to 14 for their children. Although during COVID, so crazy, we had to be so careful, and we still have to be so careful, because you do not want a contagious virus in a shelter, a communal living situation. So we opened up all of our conference rooms to be bedrooms. so that the girls could have private rooms instead of doubling up in rooms. Our shelter is has the feel of like a women's dorm, and they share rooms, except for those that have children. There's one room for the mom and her child or 2 children. But other than that, they share rooms, but not during COVID. So we turned our conference rooms into bedrooms, and we had to have quarantine areas for when they first came, and it's crazy. But anyway, so our capacity is a little bit down right now because we're still following COVID safety practices. So it's like our capacity is 18 or 19 right now. Go ahead. Oh. Yeah, they did look well dressed, didn't they? I mean, the younger girls, they live at home. And some of them, I'm sure you noticed, had school uniforms. We have a clothing closet, and that's what we do. We have a clothing closet, and people give us donations of clothing. It's small. So we ask people, so thanks for thinking of us in that way. We ask people to call us, because sometimes we have room and sometimes we don't in our small clothing closet. And during COVID, there were so many struggles. I mean, I know COVID's not over, but it's a little easier now. But our staffing was so stretched that we just stopped taking donations for a while. We had a number of staff who were sick during COVID throughout. And we just really, and the workload just went through the roof with serving girls that were in quarantine area and girls that were upstairs, downstairs. And so we stopped taking clothing and just, did without donations. Now we're coming back into taking donations, but we ask people to call us. We make sure that we have room and we need that, and also that we have staff to process the donations. So donations are welcome. If we have the room, and we just ask people to call. Go ahead. Oh, yeah, thanks for that question. Do services extend outside of Southwest Detroit? Yes. As far as our shelter goes, it doesn't matter where you come from. You show up at our door or you call it, because we're the only one doing much of what we do. And for some, for one thing, we're the only runaway shelter in the city of Detroit, which is bad, because there's no runaway shelter for boys in the whole city of Detroit. There are a few in the suburbs, so as far as our shelter goes, it doesn't matter where somebody comes from. If they show up at our door or they call us, and we can go pick them up or get them help getting to us. Yes, sometimes outside of Detroit. Yep. So that's our shelter. As far as our street outreach program, we're mostly in the city, and that's largely because we have a relationship with the police. The city is very big, and this is kind of a yucky thing, but as far as sex work goes, street-based sex work, the girls and women can be from anywhere. The customers are largely from the suburbs, weird as that is. But the girls and women, they can be from anywhere. They can be from a different country, certainly from different states. Most of them are local, but we do that all over the city. And we have a relationship with the police, so they see us driving down the street, stopping to talk to women, and girls who are soliciting, and they know not to harass us. And so we try not to go into the suburbs. Occasionally we do, but it's a little complicated. And then our prevention program is mostly specific to Southwest because our capacity is limited. We can't even meet the needs of girls in Southwest Detroit. And we drive and pick them up every day. So our prevention program is more specific to Southwest with some exceptions. our shelter is wherever you come from, come on, and street outreach is the whole city. Wherever there's street-based sex work going on. Other questions? I haven't looked at my watch for a few minutes to say after 11 you're probably supposed to be done. Okay, other questions or comments? Go ahead. Thank you for that question. The question is, if they have a substance abuse problem, how do we manage that? It's a really important issue. So a couple things I'll say. One is that for the girls and young women in the shelter, surprisingly, very few of them have a substance abuse problem. Many of them have parents with substance abuse problems. Alcohol is common, and of course it's not allowed in our shelter. Those who have a substance abuse issue, we get them involved in treatment. And it's really, really hard for minors, especially if they don't have insurance. You know, it's just really complicated. We have to connect with their parents, get them on Medicaid, or maybe a parent has insurance. It's really hard to get substance abuse treatment for minors, but we do. As far as the girls and women in sex work, often substance abuse goes along with sex work. Often. In fact, it's so common that it's a tool that traffickers use to get people to, be stuck with them. And so, I've talked with a lot of girls and young women about their experiences that they need to recover from addiction and from sex work. And it's hard because, I'm thinking of a young woman who I spoke with a couple weeks ago who was trafficked from when she was 12 years old. And she learned that that's all she can do. That's all that she is good for. And she really didn't know any other lifestyle. And when she finally got, and she's 23 now, and she's been with us for a few years. She found us when she was 17. When she stopped doing sex work, customers and traffickers kept trying to find her and calling her. She had to change her phone. But, there's this pull, especially if you're short of money, and that's one way that you know. So anyway, what they've told us is they have to recover from the life that might be the only thing they ever knew, sex work, and from addiction. They have to recover from both of those things at the same time. So they can be in a substance abuse treatment program and be in our program, and they complement each other. Go ahead. Wow. Wonderful. Mm-hmm. Right. You just hit the nail on the head. Did anybody need me to repeat what she said? No. Oh, got it. Okay. So I'll abbreviate. So your daughter is an attorney and has worked in the summers to help expunge the records of women who've been arrested for sex work. Granddaughter. Okay, granddaughter. Is that a good summary of what you said? Yeah, we are so fortunate to have a group of attorneys doing pro bono work for us in exactly the same thing, helping expunge the records of those who've been arrested for sex work. And in Michigan, a great thing is that over the last 7 or 8 years, Michigan has caught up with a lot of other states. Michigan's kind of in the middle in the country with adjusting our laws so that girls and women involved in sex work, especially who are exploited and trafficked, are treated more as a victim than as a perpetrator. So we're getting there, but there are still lots of records. The other thing, this is a little bit of a different topic, but the other thing that those attorneys do for us is so many of the young women that come to us, they can be 16, 17 years old, and their credit is shot because parents put utility bills in their names when they were 2 months old. And it just went on from there. And I'm not vilifying the parents, you know, sometimes that's the only way they could get utilities turned on in their home. That might be the only family member who doesn't have a pad credit is a young child. So we use the attorney's support to help clean up their credit records as well. So yeah, they have all kinds of obstacles. So I know I've way overshot my time. So I will stop. Thank you so much for your attention and for your interest in our mission. Okay, thanks. Try not to fall off this step.
That was so interesting and so astounding, all the different areas of the children's lives that you touch. I really appreciate your coming and telling the story. Okay. Okay, so I was just saying we appreciate her, Amy, you coming and telling your story, and it's astounding the ways you help the children. And okay. Here. And now I think Barbara's coming up to talk about our annual giving and some other things. I'll go down this way.
Could you hand me the mouse? Maybe I can do it from there. Is there something on the screen about a pledge? Okay, that is good. Hopefully I can advance it with this. What I'm going to talk to you briefly about is our pledge for the year. UWF invites all women to join us in our mission to help women, children, and youth in our community. Through our service and pledges, we can make a difference in the lives of those around us. So that screen just kind of explains that your pledge is to missions, and it's the amount a woman gives to her local unit to fulfill the purpose of United Women in Faith. Pledges or financial gifts are not a prerequisite for membership. It is member giving, however, that helps fund the total mission for the organization. Our dues stay with our local, and that's particularly much needed this year because of the past few years of COVID and changes with the rummage sale. In the past, we had raised thousands through the rummage sale, and last year we got $56 from the rummage sale. That was based on United Methodist Women helping with the rummage sale. So, let's see. No, that's not taking it forward. Could you use the arrow to advance it? The forward arrow? I'll say something when I want it changed. I have one slide for each of the recipients, although I don't have a slide for the first recipient, which was the Greater Detroit District, and we gave them $1,000 last year. The United Methodist Retirement Community, which is in Chelsea, Our donation makes charity possible for those in need in a variety of different ways. Alternatives to nursing home, daycare, in-home care, independent living, assisted living, rehabilitation and skilled care, and also respite and short stay care. I'm reading what's on the screen because the people at home aren't seeing the screen. Forward. Cass Community Social Services always receives money from us, and it's used for food, housing, health, and jobs. Next. We've always given to the United Methodist Children's Home, and as our speaker was saying, I think in 2017, Crane picked them as the best managed nonprofit. In 2020, the United Methodist Children's Home was Crane's best run nonprofit. Last year, they served 106 children. They united 22 forever families through adoption. They prepared 17 young men for their future through their Independent Living Plus program. There were 28 mentors that were bonded with children at the Methodist Children's Home, and 102 young men found safety and healing in their residential program. Thank you. Last year was the first year we added Motor City Wesley. Motor City Wesley is a collection of student-led communities that use their passion, skills, and faith and social networking to create a better life for people in Detroit. So our donations are given to students who lead these projects, and they're closely supervised. Okay, Henderson Settlements received money from us. They have a mission, they have volunteers that work in home construction and repair. There's youth ministries, prenatal care, education, senior care. They do retail with craft shows and shops and a thrift shop. There's also greenhouses and farm. And I just talked about Motor City Wesley. Another thing that our pledge money goes to is Bibles. And the Bibles go to jail inmates in Oakland County, and they also go to third graders here at our church. Let me see. We're going to be asking for a pledge today, if you're prepared, or at any other time if you want to give the pledge. I had a question with the name change to United Women in Faith. What would we make checks out to? We are still using United Methodist Women, and we will be using that name for our checking account and our checks into the foreseeable future. I, as treasurer, have contact with the person who coordinates the treasurers at the Detroit district level, and her comment was that the legal and time-consuming methods that we'd have to go through to change the bank accounts, it was better to just leave it that way for now. There's also another problem that she didn't allude to, but I had been in a workshop where they talked about this before. We need to legally be declared a 501c3, and apparently that hadn't been done, but if I were to open up an account in the new name, we would need the lawyer and the papers for that to take place. So for the time being, although we will be referring to the group as United Women in Faith, the checks and financial will be UMW. Is that clear. Okay, let's, maybe we could all repeat the prayer that's on the screen. Dear Lord, we are grateful that you have given us strength as women in our UMF group at Farmington First United Methodist to make a difference in our community through our pledges. Be present in the heart of each of us as we individually make a decision to financially support improving our community. Bless all the gifts that are received as a result of this program. Amen. Another one. The donations usually get made in the fall, and this is a list of the donations that were made last fall. And the total comes to $2,274 and some cents. So that's what we were able to give out last year. I'm not going to give a detailed financial report, but this shows what our financial situation is right now. Our checking account has $2,288 and some cents. The savings account is at $1,404 and cents, and that gives us a total of $3,693. And that's the report. Are there any questions about the Treasury or the pledges? Okay, thank you. Did Karen return? I think, is she now? I guess we're done. Well, she had something that she wanted to say.
Okay, we're looking for Karen.
She might be saying goodbye to her speaker.
Oh, to Amy, okay.
Does someone want to get her? Or I could.
I don't know what it was she wanted to share, or I would do that. Maybe we should just end, it's been long.
There was one thing I know that she wanted to say.
Okay.
I feel uncomfortable saying it without her having brought it up, but we were discussing whether specifically our Lydia circle would return to in-person. And she had proposed that we take some type of a vote on that. And I had some feelings about that I thought should be introduced. Whether or not we meet in person for United Women in Faith is not merely a personal preference. It's more about the future of our church. Many of us have signed the Growth Covenant. If you haven't, the position for Growth Covenant is on the website under Resources, and Pastor Anthony has talked about it. I think there might be paper copies in the lobby. But it talks about creating a culture of authentic hospitality and building intentional connections. And Pastor Anthony has talked about how when people join a group, it's not just for information. Now, a committee meeting is different. That can easily be done over Zoom. But a meeting like UWF is about building connections. Gathering in person is a Christian practice that we build community and connections. Pastor Anthony talked about how when people are looking for a church, they're looking for those connections. And that's why I feel strongly about doing in-person with UWF as much as possible. Karen had announcements about upcoming meetings. You have some of that? Yeah. We don't need this, do we? Because
No, we're tall, but anyway. So the next meeting of the Lydia Circle is Friday, May 20th, and I think it's
up in the air
yeah.
whether it'll be Zoom.
It's under discussion how we will gather. And the next general meeting is September 17th at 10 a.m. here in the sanctuary and online. So I think we can end now. We always say that one prayer. Do most of you have that memorized? I don't, but I have it written here. So, the Lord watch between me and thee while we are absent from one another. Amen.